Então, sobre o futuro das taxas de juros e do programa de...
Hi, Ian.
Hi. I'll just wait a couple more minutes. Hopefully some more people will sign in, sorry.
Yeah, my colleague Tim Curry hadn't got the link, so I've just pasted it across to him. So
Okay.
he should be joining in a sec.
Thanks. Yes, I'll make a start. I think might get some more people sign in as I get going. Obviously, today I'm going to go through some of the options in terms of starting a community group. There are various options available. Yeah, so going through some of the legal structures, understand the process in being a constituted organisation. And things like the registration process for the Charity Commission, for example. So in terms of if you're setting up a charity, you need to find trustees for your charity. Basically, funders prefer you to have 3 unrelated people to be trustees. Now, that's not a legal requirement. That's just something that funders like to have because they think it means a better, more effective board. You need to make sure the charity is for charitable purposes for the public benefit. So it can't just be benefiting a small section of the public. Otherwise, you will get rejected by the Charity Commission. Obviously, you need a name for your charity, a structure, which obviously I'll go through some of the options in terms of you've got there, which structure to be. You need a governing document, also called your constitution. If you're a charitable company, you might call it your articles of association, because articles being a company. And obviously, if you're a charitable company, you have you're both a company and a charity. And also, if you are a charity, if you're what's called a charitable incorporated, sorry, if you're just a normal charity, not a CIO, but normal charity, then you will only be able to register with the Charity Commission if your annual income is over £5,000. However, if you are a charitable incorporated organisation, then you register irrespective of your income. So you register straight away. So that can be a benefit if you want to have that registration. You must be at least 16 years old to be a trustee of a charity that is a charitable company or a CIO, at least 18 to be a trustee of any other charity. I think someone's got their microphone on. Yeah, I think I come in terms of public benefit. It's basically that it can't be too specific in terms of, I mean, I'll cover this a little bit later on, so I'll go back to it a bit later on. You must not act as a trustee if you are disqualified, unless you are authorised to do so by a waiver from the Charity Commission. Obviously, I'll cover. Yeah, just I'll be sending the slides to people afterwards, and obviously, if you have got further questions, always get in touch with me for further advice. So I'll cover some of this a bit later as well in terms of who's disqualified. I also do a more another session just about trustees, which goes into a bit more detail. So yeah, disqualified means unspent conviction for an offence involving dishonesty or deception, unspent conviction for terrorism offences, unspent conviction for specified money laundering, unspent conviction for specified bribery offences. Spent basically means there's a certain period of time, number of years after someone is convicted for an offence, it becomes spent. So you need to go to the table. There's a link on the Charity Commission's website for details about when certain convictions become spent. So we do have trustees. If you do become a charity, or you want to become a charity, you have to have trustees. They have certain duties to ensure the charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. They have to ensure that the charity complies with the charity's governing document, also with the law. So in the case of a charity, it would be with the charity law. Act in the charity's best interests. So that could mean that if some people are on if a trustee is on more than one board, they might have to declare that as a potential conflict of interest. So it's a good idea in your board meetings, if you for trustees, to have a declaration of potential conflicts of interest at the beginning of every meeting. Have things like an annual form for trustees to complete on possible conflicts of interest, just to make it clear, because obviously if there is a potential conflict of interest, the trustee involved should not really be voting. Trustees have to manage charities' resources responsibly, act with reasonable care and skill, ensure the charity is accountable. There is more information in the quite a good document by the Charity Commission called the Essential Trustee. I think people make sure their microphones are muted. Unless you want to ask me a question. So yeah, some of the trustee duties. This is a bit more detail about ensuring your charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. So ensure you understand charity's purposes as set out in the governing document. Charitable purposes are quite basically saying how what you do is charitable under the law, because under charity law only certain activities are charitable. I can help people write these if they're looking to apply to the Charity Commission, because you can be rejected by the Charity Commission, like I say, if they feel that you're not complying with charity law. Plan what your charity will do and what you want it to achieve. Be able to explain how all of the charity's activities are intended to further or support its purposes. Understand how the charity benefits the public by carrying out its purposes. And be aware spending charity funds on the wrong purposes is a very serious matter. And in some cases, trustees may have to reimburse the charity personally. So more trustee duties, they have to comply with the charity's governing document. So make sure you're not only with your constitution, but also with the charity law. So keep abreast of charity law changes and potentially other laws that apply to the charity. Taking reasonable steps to find out about legal requirements, so reading relevant guidance, taking appropriate advice. You can always come to me if you want advice. If you are a registered charity, you need to keep your details on the register up to date. If you're a registered charity, you'll need to complete a annual return with information about your charity, financial information, and submit a trustee report with accounts. Depending how detailed they are will depend on the size of your organisation in terms of turnover. Trustees must act in the charity's best interests. So decide what the best enable the charity to carry out its purposes. Someone's got a question. Yeah, so with trustees, you must make balanced and adequately informed decisions, thinking about the long term as well as the short term. Avoid putting yourself in a position where your duty to your charity conflicts with your personal interests or loyalty to any other person or body. So that's what I was saying about a good idea to have that transparency in terms of potential conflicts of interest, not only at individual board meetings, but also perhaps in an annual conflicts of interest form, to be aware of any changes. Trustees must not receive any benefit from the charity unless it's properly authorised and is clearly in the charity's interests. Trustees need to manage the charity's resources responsibly. Something called the duty of prudence, so you must act responsibly, reasonably and honestly, exercising sound judgment, making sure the charity's assets are only used to support or carry out its purposes, not to take inappropriate risks, be particularly careful if you're borrowing or investing. Obviously, this does relate to your liabilities, which we'll come on to later, depending on whether you are incorporated or unincorporated. Act with reasonable care and skill. So make use of your skills and experience, but take appropriate advice when necessary. And that obviously prepare for and attend and actively participate in trustee meetings. There can be issues where people become trustees and then don't turn up to meetings. So you might want to have like a clause saying something like, if trustees don't turn up for meetings for 6 months, they'll be sent a warning letter. Because there's no point in someone being registered as a trustee and then not taking part in any other meetings. You must make sure the charity is accountable. So comply with statutory accounting and reporting requirements. As I said, I think I'll come on to this a bit later on, but it does depend on the size of your organisation as to how much accounting and reporting requirements you have. You obviously need to demonstrate your charity is complying with the law, well run and effective. If you are a charity with a wider membership, you need to ensure that there's appropriate accountability. If your charity has membership separate from the trustees, so this is quite interesting. If you do become a CIO, for example, the Charity Commission has two template constitutions. One where you have a wider membership who are not the trustees, and the another type where the trustees are the members, because if you're incorporated, you have to have members anyway. So sometimes if an organisation wants a wider membership to feel involved, they might say something, they might have a requirement, for example, that trustees have to approve, or sorry, members have to approve the annual accounts, for example, at the AGM. So that's something to bear in mind, particularly if you want to be a CIO, whether you want to have that wider membership or not. Trustees also have to ensure accountability within the charity. For example, you delegate responsibility for particular tasks. So charity trustees make the decisions together, working as a team. You don't need to have unanimous decisions, just majority decisions. Yeah, so yeah, the wider membership is the association model. I'm trying to remember what the name of the other one is. I think I'll come on to it later anyway. So when trustees meet, you need to act within your powers, act in good faith, and only in the interests of your charity. Make sure you are sufficiently informed, taking any advice you need. Take account of all relevant factors you are aware of. Ignore any irrelevant factors. Deal with conflicts of interest, as we covered that. Make decisions that are within the range of decisions that a reasonable trustee body could make in the circumstances. You need to record the decisions making, so this is where having accurate minutes of board meetings is important. Keep a record of these board meetings because it's key to accountability in terms of keeping track of how key decisions were made and when. So trustee liability actions, just be aware, actions by the Charity Commission or the courts against trustees are very rare. Personal liability generally only arises if the failure to discharge duties causes loss to the charity or improper gain to the trustee. And the Charity Commission emphasises that it is only likely to enforce personal liability where a trustee has acted dishonestly or recklessly. I think it would, sorry, I've had a question in terms of liability. I think it's, because it's quite rare, I think, I mean, you do see instances when they go to the newspapers of people who, we're talking about large sums of money that have been fraudulently taken. So I think the threshold is quite high. But I think with, like with any legal interpretation, it kind of depends on how the courts might interpret particular fact in a case. And obviously that's something that really solicitors and barristers would be best placed to do. But I mean, I think, yeah, the bar is generally quite high. There's a lot of charities and there's not that many cases of trustees being prosecuted, and where they are, they tend to be quite egregious cases. So liabilities fall into two categories. Governance liabilities arise from the duties that a trustee has. So for example, where a trustee has entered into a contract with an organisation that benefited the trustee has to repay the improperly obtained profit. Operational liabilities are liabilities incurred by the organisation because of what the organisation does. If the charity is incorporated, then operational liabilities generally fall on the organisation. So that's why being incorporated is a benefit for trustees, because you have that limited liability, because you become in terms of the legal definition, the actual organisation becomes a legal entity. So that can be the benefit of becoming a CIO, for example, over a normal charity. So in terms of registering as a charity, you have to have charitable purposes. So charitable purposes come under the Charities Act, 13 descriptions of purposes. So these are defined as relieving poverty, education, religion, health, saving lives, citizenship or community development, the arts, amateur sport, human rights, racial or religious or racial harmony, the protection of the environment, animal welfare, the efficiency of the armed forces, police, fire, or ambulance services. So as you can see, most sort of activities would fit in one of those sort of areas. You know, things like citizenship or community development, quite a broad category. So you just have to make sure you write your charitable purposes in such a way that you're able to be your registration process with the Charity Commission won't be rejected, because it is quite a common occurrence, relatively common occurrence for Charity Commission to reject applications on the grounds of charitable purposes not being met. So why are purposes important? Yeah, like I said, the Charity Commission will decide if your organisation meets that test and can be a charity. HM Revenue and Customs will decide if it qualifies for tax relief. It needs, obviously, people, if they're joining, supporting or benefiting from a charity, understand what it does, who it helps, where and how it works, which will be in your purposes. And it helps the trustees understand the limit of what the charity can do, because the trustees must make decisions and run the charity in a way that is consistent with its purposes. So for example, if you started a charity and the primary aim or the aim under the charitable purposes was to relieve poverty, and then you started getting into, I don't know, protection of the environment. So if you started doing a lot of those activities, then really, or the trustees should be, aware, well, that's not really under our charitable purposes. It's not what we're set up to do. So sometimes you get this is known as drift, organizational drift. So organizations begin doing different things. So really there should be a review of your constitution and an amendment to take account of how perhaps what the organization is doing is no longer reflected. Well, this shouldn't really happen at all, but if it does happen, then this is why you might need to review your constitution and your purposes to take account of changes you want to make in terms of the kind of things you want to be doing. And obviously you'll need the permission. You can make amendments through the processes with the Charity Commission once if they give approval, you can make amendments to your constitution. So your charity's purposes should make it clear what outcomes your charity is set up to achieve, how it will achieve these outcomes, who will benefit from these outcomes, where the benefits extend to. So there's a hypothetical example here. For the public benefit, the relief and assistance of people in need. So that's what they're doing in any part of the world. So that's where. Who are the victims of war or natural disaster or catastrophe? That's who. By supplying them with medical aid. That's how. So as you can see, the purposes don't need to be long. I mean, if you go into the Charity Commission, you can look at different organisation purposes. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long. So I think they don't need to be long. I think they just need to cover that key information in terms of what, where, who, and how. And obviously, if you do need any help in writing your purposes, if you're in the process of registering, then just get in touch with myself on the OCA and we can give you some feedback and help in writing those purposes, because it's a good idea to get them right the first time when you are applying. So step one, what outcomes your charity is set up to achieve? So for example, the relief of poverty, to advance education, to promote healthy living. The examples here. Step two, how your charity will achieve those outcomes. For the public benefit, the protection and preservation of the environment in particular, but not exclusively, by A, the promotion of waste reduction, reuse, reclamation, recycling, advancing the education of the public. So examples of saying in the purposes of how the charity will meet the 8 outcomes. So it's just some of the examples of the kind of activities they're undertaking. So also important to distinguish between what and how. So if you're, an example here, if you're advancing education for the public benefit, so that's what you'll be doing. By the provision of a school, that's how. For children aged 5 to 11, so that's the who, those will be the beneficiaries, living in X place, so that's where. So again, the what, the how, the who, and the where, key information in your purposes. Step 3, who the outcomes will benefit and where they extend to. If your charity's purpose will only benefit a defined group of people, this needs to be a sufficient section of the public. So that's where this public benefit test comes in. There has to be a sufficiently wide section of the public. It can't be too specific, because that's just the way the charity law has been set up and it's evolved over the years. Where relevant, include in your charity's purpose any specific definitions of who can benefit, such as their age, where they live, their gender, any other defining characteristics. Another example here, the prevention or relief of poverty of young people living in Greater London who are socially excluded, in particular by providing grants to them with an opportunity to build capacity by establishing and growing a business to relieve their needs and help them integrate into society. So we've got the what is the relief of poverty, the who is young people in London who are socially excluded, the how is providing grants, and then the, obviously there we said the where is London, Greater London. Another example here, this is the Save the Children Fund, to relieve the distress and to promote the welfare of children in any country or countries without differentiation on the ground of race, colour, nationality, creed or sex, to educate the public concerning the nature, causes and effects of distress and want of welfare, as aforesaid, and to conduct and procure research concerning the same and to make available the useful results thereof. So sometimes there is this thing, the tendency to people use this kind of like legalese or ancient language, so like aforesaid and thereof, but it doesn't need to be like that. It can just be, like I said, the what. So we're talking about in this instance to relieve the distress and promote the welfare of children, the where in any country or countries, and the how, so conducting and procuring research. So a bit more about the public benefit requirement. All the purposes must be for the public benefit. Comes under the Charities Act 2011, public benefit requirement. So 2 aspects to this: a purpose must be beneficial. This must be in a way that is identifiable and capable of being proved by evidence where necessary and not based on personal views. and any detriment or harm that results from the purpose to people, property, or the environment must not outweigh the benefit, also based on evidence and not on personal views. So in terms of the public aspect, so they must benefit the public in general or a sufficient section of the public. But what is a sufficient section of the public varies from purpose to purpose. So it's not clearly defined in that sense. And it must not give rise to more than incidental personal benefit. And they're defining personal benefit as incidental, where it is a necessary result or byproduct of carrying out the purpose. So your charity name, it must not be similar to the name of an existing charity. Can't use words you don't have permission to use. Can't use offensive words or acronyms. Shouldn't be misleading, so suggesting a charity does something it doesn't. As I said before, there's options in terms of structure of the charity, which structure may suit you. Charitable company. So this means you're registered with both Charity Commission and Companies House, but you'll be a company limited by guarantee rather than by shares. Because you're incorporated as a company, the trustees have limited or no liability, debts or liabilities. And because you're limited by guarantee, you do not have share capital or shareholders, and you have members to act as guarantors. You can apply online or by post, and the cost is £40. I think you're paying to register a company, but registering as a charity is free. So that used to be the only option if you wanted to be a charity and benefit from incorporations. But however, about a few years ago now, I'm not sure, 10 years or 15 years or something ago, they created something called the Charitable Incorporated Organisation as a new legal structure. So it's an incorporated structure designed for charities. You don't register with Companies House, you only register with the Charity Commission. Trustees have limited or no liability for debts or liabilities. So if you are an organisation and you do intend to enter into contracts, employ staff, then it would be wise to become registered as a CIO rather than staying in a sort of unincorporated status, because it gives that extra protection for the trustees. As I mentioned earlier, there are two types of template constitutions available. If you don't amend them too much on the Charity Commission website, then fairly straightforward. You just have to go into decide which of the ones is going to suit you better, whether you want a wider membership, as we said, the association model, or if you just want the trustees to be the members, a foundation model. And with a template constitution, you just have to insert the name of the trustees, the details, sign it, enter your charitable purposes, and then put in things like decide how many minimum number of trustees you want, maximum number of trustees you want, how long the term, how many terms you want them to serve. So it is good practice for trustees to serve a certain number of terms and have at least a year off. I think maybe it's like 6 years or something in the generally suggested way. So a charitable trust, this is a way for a group of people, trustees, to manage assets such as money, investments, land or buildings. So sometimes grant funders are charitable trusts, and that can be one reason why some of these smaller grant funders will only fund registered charities, because it can be part of the conditions of being a charitable trust. Unincorporated charitable association, this is the most simplest form if you just want to get a community group up and running. You can easily have a very simple constitution, just enables you to open a bank account, So it's good, it can work if you just want to get, group up and running, or you're going to stay very small with a very small amount of funding per year. However, as an unincorporated charitable association, you can't employ staff or own premises. So the governing document, this is sometimes called your constitution or rule book. It explains how your charity is run. It's a legal document. It's going to have in there your charitable purposes. What it can do to carry out its purposes. So these is what's called your powers. Who runs it? So who are the trustees? Who are the members? Who are going to be a member? So, for example, if you had a process of recruiting members, how would an organisation or a person become a member? How meetings will be held? What's the process for trustees being appointed? Potential rules about paying trustees, investments, holding land, whether the trustees can change the governing document, including the objects of these would be called the amendment provisions, how to close the charity, so this would be called the dissolution provisions. So it's quite good with the CIO, say with the Charity Commission templates for the CIO, they're quite long, so they do cover all these things, and as long as you don't make too many amendments to them, then the Charity Commission should be relatively happy with them. Obviously, go through all the clauses and see if there are any clauses you want to make, but the Charity Commission has tried to sort of make those CIA constitutions fairly in depth to cover all these kind of things. Trustees should have a copy of the charity's governing document and refer to it to know how to run the charity, how to run the organisation. As I said, the Charity Commission does have model governing documents. So choose the right. Obviously, if you have, I think the Charity Commission has lots of very in-depth websites. I think sometimes people have issues navigating it because it is so in-depth. Obviously, get in touch with me if you need any support in terms of finding the suitable template. So, yeah, basic constitution for unincorporated associations. CIO, you've got the foundation or the association constitution, just choose which one that suits you best. If you're a charitable company, you have a memorandum and articles of association, and trust deed or will for trusts. So, yeah, if you're what's called unincorporated charitable association, then you can't register with the Charity Commission until your income hits £5,000. If you're a CIO, the income is irrelevant, you register straight away. And if you are registering as an unincorporated association, you'll need to provide proof that you have the income of £5,000. And then you'll also need to include things like the name of your organisation, bank or building society details, recent accounts, contact details, names of trustees, dates of birth, and also a copy of your charity's governing document in PDF format. So if you did want to register once you hit the 5,000 threshold, then the proof of income would be like in your latest published annual accounts, again in PDF format, or it could be a recent bank statement, or a formal offer of funding from a recognised funding body. In terms of accounts and annual reports, you can register your charity's details with HM Revenue and Customs to get tax back on things like gift aid donations. If you are a registered charity, you must report your charity's total income and expenditure, even if you don't have to send a full return. So again, depends on the size of your organisation in terms of turnover. This has to be done within 10 months of the end of your financial year. So people can choose different, I've seen lots of different financial years, so I think most people would stick to the wider financial year, which would be 1st of April until the 31st of March the next year. Some organisations have calendar financial years, so they start 1st of January to 31st of December, and I've even seen some, I think some school-related or education-related charities sometimes have it lining up with the school year, so starting the 1st September. So be aware of when your financial year ends. So if you were working on the normal financial year model and a year ended 31st of March, that means you would have to submit your annual return by the 31st of January the following year. So be aware of those dates. Only charities with a gross income of more than £25,000 in their financial year are required to have their accounts independently examined or audited. So yeah, the type of scrutiny depends on your income and assets. Independent examination, if your income is between 25 and £1 million, and an audit is required where the gross income exceeds 1 million. So yeah, that's charities. If you've got any more questions, obviously just get in touch with me after the session. I'm now going to talk about community interest company. So this is another common option. I would say nowadays probably the most common options is CIO or community interest company, or CIC. Again, like the CIO, fairly relatively recent, only established in 2005. So basically it's a limited company with special additional features created for the use of people who want to conduct a business or other activity for community benefit and not purely for private advantage. However, you're not a charity under the, I mean, this does get confusing because people might say, well, there's a charitable, sometimes people just use the term charity or charitable in terms of community benefit, but under the law, only certain activities are charitable. So it's not, in legal sense, a charity, and it does not benefit from charitable status. So you can have various options in being a CIC. You could be limited by guarantee without a shared capital, be limited, or private company limited by shares, or public company limited by shares. However, you need to be aware that most grant funders, if they do fund CICs, they will only fund CICs limited by guarantee. With a CIC, directors can be paid. You don't have trustees because you're not a charity. However, funders will want you to have a management committee. I know some people, for example, I met and they've had a CIC and they're the sole director, and that's, funders are basically not interested because they want to have a management committee, kind of reflecting the structure of a charity where you've got that board of trustees to provide that level of oversight. It's not as regulated with the CIC system. So most funders will just say there needs to be a management committee, and the management committee need to be directors. But there's not that clear distinction between charities where you have staff and trustees. Like I say, with the CIC, you can have a director who sits on the management committee, but they can still be paid. Whereas with trustees, they can't receive funding for trustees. They can only receive payment for doing activities which are not related to them being trustees, as long as they're approved by the board, as long as there's no conflict of interest. So, for example, there is a clause in the CIO template constitution about paying trustees, and it's only under certain circumstances. So that's obviously why a lot of people are choosing CICs, because there's slightly more flexibility in terms of paying directors and people in management committee. A CIC's name must end in either CIC or community interest company, so it needs to be there in the name to let people know. You can register online for a cost of £27. You need to adopt a suitable constitution in the forms of articles of association. You need to make a community interest statement on form CIC 36 or CIC 37, declaring that its activities will be carried on for the benefit of the community and how this will be achieved. Again, if you're having any issues with the whole registration process of being a CIC, just get in touch with myself on Yoka to give you that support, to guide you through the process. So you need to satisfy the CIC regulator that a reasonable person might consider that the CIC's activities are or will be carried on for the benefit of the community. This is known as the community interest test, and it's the test that the CIC will have to continue to meet throughout its life. So this threshold community interest test is not as high as the charitable purposes tests for the charity, so it is easier to register as a CIC than a charity. So that's another reason why, if your group is carrying out activities which would not meet that threshold of charitable activities, then it's easier to register as a CIC. It's literally just a couple of questions about how you meet that community interest test. A company will not satisfy the test if it carries on certain political activities, or if a reasonable person might consider that its activities are carried on only for the benefit of the members of a particular body, or the employees of a particular employer. You also need to make a declaration that it will not be an excluded company, which means that it must not be owned or controlled by a political party or a political campaigning organisation. You also need to have an asset lock. Now, this is designed to ensure that the assets of the CIC, so this could include things like profits or surpluses generated by activities, are used for the community and are not transferred, for example, into a normal private company. So assets must either be retained within the CIC to be used for the community purposes for which it was formed, but if they are transferred out of the CIC, then they have to meet certain requirements. So this is particularly relevant to where you've got situations sometimes where charities have a trading arm, and it's the trading arm is a CIC, the main organisation is a charity, and then they're transferring assets because the CIC allows more flexibility in terms of trading. They can transfer assets from the CIC into the charity. So the following requirements: transfer must satisfy one of these requirements is made full market value so that the CIC retains the value of the assets transferred. It is made to another asset locked body, so this could be another CIC or a charity, a registered society or non-UK based equivalent, as specified in the Articles of Association. It is made to another asset locked body within the consent of the regulator, or it is made for the public benefit. And provision relating to this must be included in the CIC's articles. CICs are also able to adopt asset lock rules that impose more stringent requirements, provided they also include these basic provisions. Staff and directors of the CIC can draw a salary, but this must be within the provisions of the asset lock, i.e. it must not be disproportionately high in relation to the services being provided. I think in terms of salary, it also depends where the funding is coming from, because if you are a CIC but you're applying to a grant funder, then that will be specified in your grant in terms of how much money will go towards salary costs, management costs, or an officer delivering. So it's more to do with if you had a CIC was generating income, it was unrestricted income through trading, for example, that's where you'd have more flexibility. But if you're just applying as a CIC to a grant funder, then it's not particularly different to a charity, because the grant funder will specify if it's restricted, like I say, if it's restricted income, how it can be spent. Annual CIC report. CICs are required to produce an annual report, which will be delivered with accounts and a £15 fee to Companies House. This report will be placed on public record. The report records the CIC's activities and how those involved stakeholders during the past year. This is to basically ensure that the CIC is serving the community, and that community can see what the CIC has been doing. Also needs to contain information such as payments to directors, declarations of dividends would only apply to if you're limited by shares. You can go to see a completed example of the link there. And it's got a hypothetical example here as well. So this is something they've done themselves just to show you, the CIC regulators show you what you need to put in there. So part 1, general description of the company's activities. And then the hypothetical example is just saying here, the company runs a village shop, a general store in the village with a particular emphasis on selling locally produced food. And then it's got some examples of how the activities have benefited the community. So local residents have been able to buy groceries, number of food miles is reduced. So it's not a huge amount of detail that has to go into this report. It's just a bit of an idea of what we've been doing. And then the second part is how has the CIC consulted with local stakeholders, who the company stakeholders were, how they were consulted, and what response was taken in terms of the feedback from the consultations. And same example with the village. They've said things like they've asked people at the shop, built a profile of local consumer needs. So it's literally it's not an onerous amount of work. It's literally just a couple of paragraphs. You need to put in your annual report saying what you've done and how you consulted with local stakeholders. So yeah, any questions? Obviously, I'll share the slides with people.
Ian, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
You've been very clear and extremely detailed about the responsibilities of the people, of the trustees of a charity, and the kind of obligations of a charity. Could you now be a bit more explicit about the benefits? Because I think I understand them, but I'd appreciate you just summarising the benefits of being a charity.
You mean as opposed to being a CIC, for example?
Well, yes, obviously, because CIC is not a charity. But as I say, I think I know what you're going to say, but no point in asking a question if I then give the answer. So what are the benefits of being charity? I mean, we're agonising over, we're currently a company limited by guarantee. We're not a registered charity.
Yeah.
And we're agonising over whether we should be. And
Well,
therefore we're trying to flush out.
One clear advantage is that like I said in the thing about lots of the smaller trusts and foundations will only fund registered charities. So if you are a registered charity, it does maximise your potential funding opportunities.
Yeah.
Because it just means there's more grant funding opportunities you can apply to. So that's a clear benefit over being a company, a not-for-profit company.
Yeah.
If grant funding is your main source of income, then there's a benefit there. It just means that you've got this slightly more onerous sort of requirements in terms of compliance with the Charity Commission, in terms of well, I say in terms of the registration process, because the charitable purposes need to be, it's a tougher threshold complying with charity. But I think as long as your charitable purposes, I mean, it depends what you're doing, but as long as your charitable purposes are written via that formula that I covered, like the who, what, where, how, and it's not something ridiculous like, I don't know, selling something that's clearly not charitable is never going to be charitable. Obviously, that's ridiculous. I think sometimes people just doing what they're doing. It could be charitable, but they just haven't written it in the right way, and that's why it gets rejected by the Charity Commission. So that's what I was saying about we're happy to help people write their charitable purposes because it reduces the chance of the Charity Commission rejecting. I mean, another requirement is obviously the meeting that test in terms of benefiting a sufficiently wide section of the public. So if you're doing something that's very specific and it's only helping us, a very narrow range of people in a small geographical area, that might be another reason why the Charity Commission might say, well, you're not meeting that public benefit test. And obviously, if you're a private company, if you're a not-for-profit company, none of these things really apply. So it's easier to register. It's probably quicker to register as a company because also I think the culture of companies to do with trade, they've made it easy to encourage companies trading, whereas the Charity Commission is more about regulation and I think the Charity Commission has got tougher. So I think they might have had kind of like resource constraints as well. So bear in mind the registration process might take a bit longer. I don't know how long the registration process would take with the Charity Commission because they are facing certain resource issues. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, wider access to funding is obviously one benefit we had on the list. The other one we had was tax, of course. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not an expert on those tax things, but yeah, definitely as a registered charity, you can register with the Charity Commission, with the HM Revenue and Customs for certain tax benefits. Like I say, I'm not a massive expert on what those tax benefits would be. So I think it's something like gift aid, you can get benefit in terms of gift aid, but yeah, that's clearly another bit. I think you don't even need to be a registered charity. I think you can be, like I said, an unincorporated charitable association that's not registered with the Charity Commission. You can still register with Revenue and Customs as a charity. Obviously, if you're a company, you won't be able to do that.
Yeah. And the final question for me, if we were a registered charity, could our paid chief executive be a trustee?
Generally, no. Generally, like I say, the idea with charities is that there's that distinction. So if you're a larger charity with staff, then yeah, the idea is that the trustees are not involved in day-to-day operational matters. The staff are the ones doing day-to-day operational matters. The trustees are there to provide sort of oversight at a more strategic level and not be involved in day-to-day activities. Obviously, with very small organisations, it's not so clear cut. Where a small charity has no staff, then it's a bit more difficult. But I think yeah, where we have clear distinction between the staff and the trustees, then yeah, I mean that's what I was referring to earlier about there's that clause about, well, trustees could be paid for certain activities. So say for example, you've got a trustee who is an expert IT person, web developer, and the charity wants to build a website, then you would have to say, yeah, that trustee could declare it, say, I want to be, or there could be a decision made by the other trustees to pay that person to build a website, but that trustee could not take part in that decision. They'd have to say, I have a conflict of interest, but they would not be paid as a trustee. They'd be paid to build a website, so they'd be paid as a web developer. So trustees cannot be paid to be trustees.
Okay, thank you.
I would say definitely, yeah. If you've got that clear distinction between staff and trustees, then yeah, you need to stick to that. I'm not sure who had their hand up next.
Yes, I did.
Okay, Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. we are actually a registered charity. I'm from Advice for Renters. We've been a registered charity for a long time, and most of our services are delivered directly to individual private tenants. But we do have a campaigning arm, and one campaign is called Fairer Housing, which is designed to involve the people who are in the worst housing. And it's always been clear from the start that they should be in the driving seat and running the show. Well, those members have now decided that they'd like to be an independent organisation in its own right, and there's lots of good reasons for that. But whereas as a registered charity, our campaigning has been just a relatively small part of our overall work that we do. So there's no question we meet the aims of a charity. I'm not certain whether we could be a charity if the main purpose of the organisation is campaigning, albeit is campaigning with people in need and educating those people about the systemic changes needed to end the housing crisis, basically, so they could conceivably access a decent place to live. So we'd kind of concluded that we probably would have to be a CIC, but I came today just to have one final look to see whether, and on the basis of some of the things you've said, whether we might possibly fit in to be a CIO. And that might be on the basis that although we're not directly delivering individual services, we certainly triage, and we certainly have to make sure as we grow that those families in poor housing who get involved, that they do have access to support, individual support. So in a sense, you could argue that part of our work would be sort of triage and referral for families in need.
Sorry, so what's the legal structure at the moment?
At the moment, it's just part of Advice for Renters. We have got a charitable grant which has gone through one of the other organisations, because it's actually the current active members of the group are small grassroots, usually BAME communities, and the families that they provide direct support for.
But you said you're a registered charity.
No, Advice for Renters is a registered charity.
Yeah.
At the moment, it is servicing this campaign, but the members of the campaign have decided they would like Fairer Housing to be a separate organisation in its own right. So I'm charged with going away to look at what would be the appropriate structure for that new organisation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fine line between campaigning for the interests of your beneficiaries, which you can do as a charity, and then getting involved in political campaigning, changing the law. And if you remember a few years ago, I think the government changed the law because they were saying, if charities are receiving public funds, they shouldn't be trying to change the law. And then charities were saying, well, actually, if it's in the interest of the beneficiaries, then, so there has been a sort of slight chilling effect in terms of legislation around this area. But I think, funders like Trust for London, they will fund almost like campaigning, strengthening the voice of the beneficiaries who are involved in their service. They say, yes, but it's not political campaigning, it's simply campaigning for the voice of your beneficiaries to be heard. And I think that's okay under being a charity. And I think, because in terms of being a political instrument, organisation, the same rules apply to being a CIC. You can't be overtly political in that sense either. So I think if you just see it from the perspective of your strengthening the voice of your beneficiaries, then that's fine, but keep that separate from saying you're actually getting involved in politics or political campaigning, because that's where the differentiation lies.
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, we would be looking for support from local authority and local authority associations, but then, for example, London councils might possibly affiliate, which is a Labour majority organisation, but the local government association is, of course, Tory controlled at the moment. So we wouldn't be seen to be favouring any particular party in any respect, and we wouldn't dream of doing that anyway.
Yeah, so I think just see it from the perspective you're there to.
I mean, it just occurs to me talking to you that maybe because there are obviously advantages in being a charity if we can, maybe we should just try that, and if it gets rejected, then the fallback would be the CIC. Yeah,
like I said, the CIC is a lower threshold, so there is that element of.
Yeah, it's just that the CICs that I've looked at do seem to be, as you were explaining, mainly kind of like trading or like, not for profit.
Well, I think that's kind of like the original, I think, idea with CICs. It was a legal structure for social enterprises.
Yes.
I think what's happened is because some of the major grant funders now fund CICs limited by guarantee, and because there is that with the CIC, you don't have to have a board of trustees and directors who can be on the management committee, and directors can be paid. That some people like that option because it means, I don't have to handle, because typically someone starts an organization, they think, well, I want to start getting paid for it. I don't want to hand the control over to trustees. So
yeah, well, I think we would want trustees actually, because that's really important, I think, for families themselves to be.
Yeah, I mean, there is a slight grey area to me in terms of CIC governance, because it basically is not as regulated, it's nowhere near as regulated as it is for trustees and charities.
True.
So it literally just says, a management, literally all it is a management, funders like to see a management committee who are directors. That's literally all it is. Whereas with trustees is the governance compliance requirements are much higher.
Okay, that's very helpful, thanks.
Yeah, Richard, I think you're talking about cooperatives. I think that's actually something I could add to this training session, because I haven't really looked into cooperatives that much, because I don't really get any, I've never really had many questions about it, but
okay, if you could, I'd appreciate if you could do that. And I know that Voluntary Action Harrow have some expertise, and I think they are a workers' cooperative. Yeah, so
I mean, I think there are some other structures out there, so maybe I'll look into them and add them. I don't really get many questions about them, because I'd say most of the questions nowadays tends to be about community groups, CIC, CIOs, but certainly something I can look into adding.
Yeah, I'm active in the Cooperative Party, and one of the things I'm pushing for a Hounslow manifesto is to double the size of the cooperative sector in the borough. So yeah, I want to have some tools in place for doing that. So, for example, workers' cooperative for providing care, or a community cooperative of care receivers and caregivers. Some examples around the country which I wanted to sort of pilot. And then the other question I put in there was, is there a pathway for converting charitable companies limited by guarantee into CIOs? That was one of the things that was talked about when CIOs were introduced. So, and then my comment on somebody's question, Tim's question earlier, was in my experience, if you can register as a charity, then you should. 9 times out of 10, it's the if you can do it, then you should do it. So that's my questions and a comment.
In terms of, I think the issue, my understanding in terms of the, you cannot switch organizations. Basically, what you have to do, whether it's turning from a CIC into CIO, turning from charitable company into a CIO, you have to dissolve the existing organization and re-register with the Charity Commission as a CIO. So, you can't, and you just transfer the assets. There's ways in which you transfer the assets into the new organization, but I think, you can't, because with this charitable company, you're dissolving the company. The company will no longer exist.
Okay, could you check that, because it was one of the stated benefits of them introducing CIOs back it
Yeah, I
is
mean, I'll
15
certainly look
years
into
ago.
it. That's my
So I think there
moment.
might
I'll
be a,
certainly look into it and get back to you.
yeah.
Yeah, was it Kofi next?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Just a quick question about the unincorporated charitable associations, I believe you call them. Yeah, what sort of services or groups tend to become unincorporated charitable associations?
Yeah, basically, if people want to get a group up and running, typically someone come along and say, I've got this new idea for a group, I want to get going quickly. It's just a way that enables you to get a community group up and running really quickly. It's a very basic constitution. It enables you to go to a bank and say, I want to open a community account. Once you've got a community account open, that enables you to apply to grant funders, because grant funders won't put money into personal bank accounts, generally speaking. So it's basically just a way of you're a charity, but you're not actually a registered charity. So sometimes people might just call themselves a community group. There's still a possibility, even though, like I said earlier, even though you're not a registered charity, I think you can still apply to HMRC customers for tax purposes. But like I say, it's just if you want to get a small group up and running, you want to have a bank account, you want to apply to funding. And if some groups, if they stay very small, they might, because a lot of groups, they might only want like a few £100, £1,000 a year just to keep their small activities running. They don't need to go to the next step of becoming a registered charity, because they can get enough money as a community, small community group. They can apply to the local council, for example, get awards for all. They get a small amount of money per year. That's all they need to go. If you want to grow, I would say to people, you can start off as a charitable unincorporated association, get going, get a bank account going, then start the process of registering with the CIO. Like I say, I don't know. I think the Charity Commission is under sort of resource constraints, so it could take a while to register as a CIO. So that's longer term growth. It means you've got access, obviously, to more funding opportunities. You've got that a possibility to enter into contracts as an organisation, employ staff, have limited liability for the trustees. So that's more like long-term growth. Like I say, if you're just a very small organisation, you're never going to grow very much. Then just being a charitable, unincorporated organisation might suit you. It just depends on the size of your organisation.
Okay. Thank you. But they still also have to state the what, who, and why of their purpose.
That's only if you register.
Right.
So that's so the only people I say when you are unregistered, the benefit of the constitution is basically just it allows you to go along to the bank and say, I'd like to open an account. The bank isn't looking at your charitable purposes. The bank is just saying, oh, right, you. It's really when you apply to the Charity Commission, they will go through your charitable purposes and with a fine-tooth comb and say, well, I don't think you're meeting the criteria. So it's when you're registering with the Charity Commission, that's when the charitable purposes become really important. And with a unincorporated charitable organisation, you only register when you hit the 5,000 threshold. And I would say, if you're hitting the 5,000 threshold, you probably should be thinking about becoming CIO anyway. So yeah, it's really more about the size of the organisation. If you are going to stay really small, you might think, it's not worth the hassle registering with the CIO. But some groups just like it to have that sort of confirmation. I've got a charity number. It gives that element of confidence, because obviously if you are an unincorporated charitable organisation, you're not registered, so you don't have a charitable number. It's only when you register with the Charity Commission you have that charity number.
Okay, thank you very much.
One place, London. You're on mute.
All right. Hello, Elliot.
Hi.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So basically, my question is here: can a trustee be paid for their limited company services? That's just one of my questions, actually.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, what kind of, are you talking about a charitable company?
Say a social enterprise, and you have a trustee, or a charity like unincorporated association. You have a trustee that also owns a limited company, and if that limited company provides a service for the charity, is it okay for that limited company to be paid, owned by a trustee?
So the person is a trustee, but they also own a CIC company.
A limited company. They have their own personal limited company that they own that maybe can provide a service for the charity, for that unincorporated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the importance about conflict of interest comes into it. So it has to be a decision. Obviously, I think that, first of all, the constitution of the charity should specify what would take place, what needs to be, what the rules need to take place. I mean, that's the ideal of the constitutions. It has all the rules in there to follow. I mean, it depends how detailed it is. I would say there's definitely like the case of the conflict of interest where I think the trustee who owns the company would have to say in the board meeting, I cannot take part in this decision because there's a conflict of interest. But if the other trustees voted, approved it, then that would be okay. I mean, that's generally the position where basically, you just have to be transparent about the potential conflicts of interest, and obviously a trustee can't vote to benefit themselves. They have to say in that meeting, I'm not involved in this particular decision-making process because there's a conflict of interest. Because like I said, the main thing about trustees is they cannot be paid to be trustees. If they're able to deliver another service which the charity requires, then I think that's okay as long as the trustees approve it. And like I said, as long as the particular trustee who is involved makes it clear they're not taking part in that decision because of that potential conflict of interest.
And that all has to be recorded in a minute that took place then.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously all board meetings of trustees, you need to have minutes taken because that records decision-making process, how decisions are made. Obviously, yeah, in the minutes, you make that note in that item, the potential conflict of interest. This is why X did not take part in the decision-making process. Because obviously, trustees are not there to benefit from being trustees. Trustees are volunteers. They're there. You can pay expenses to trustees in terms of things like travel, food, perhaps, but they're not there. It's a voluntary position, so they're not there to benefit from it. So that's where you have to have a clear distinction. If they are in some way providing another service to the charity, they provide that service on an entirely separate basis. It's nothing to them. It's nothing about them being trustees. It's not because they're trustees. But obviously, you need to make it clear that they're not involved in the decision-making process, because obviously, if a trustee is seen to be involved in the decision-making process which personally benefits them, that's where you get a conflict of interest.
Now, when it comes to fundraising, for instance, digital fundraising, say, can trustees also do that? Take part in digital fundraising? Like writing for fun? Yeah,
I mean, I think trustees are not really supposed to be involved in the day-to-day operations. This is where it gets, it's easier with larger organizations where you can say there's a clear distinction between these are the staff, these are the trustees. I think obviously the smaller organizations, but again, as long as a trustee is not actually personally benefiting from it, then I would see no issue with that. I think, is it an organization then with all volunteer run?
Trustees are volunteer run, but let's say the managing director, he gets paid like via self-employment, like get paid his fees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's got one member of staff.
One member of staff, you said.
How many members of staff has the organization got?
Just one, which is the managing director. He charges for his fees, right? But the trustees don't get paid, obviously. But I'm wondering, the managing director also writes the application forms for granting that. Now, can trustees also take part in that? That's what I'm wondering.
Again, I think it depends if they're being paid. If they're being paid to do it, again, you have to go through the same process I said earlier about avoiding conflicts of interest. If they're doing it as volunteers, I wouldn't see a massive conflict of interest, although, in some ways you might say, well, it helps the trustees because they could get an idea of what the issues that the charity charities facing. So I think that's the key issue, is if they are being paid, then it needs to go through the process I've mentioned earlier. If they're just doing it as volunteers, then I wouldn't really see an issue to regarding.
Okay. Now let's move on to CIC, please. Just 2 questions. How many minimum directors must you have to be registered as a CIC?
Well, there's a difference. I mean, under law, you only need 1 director, but if you're going to apply to grant funders like you to have 3 unrelated people.
As your directors, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. 3. So
it's a similar process with charities. I mean, charities, legally you could just have 1 trustee, but grant funders prefer you to have at least 3 unrelated people because they think it's sort of better level of oversight.
Okay, and these managing director all have their different roles. Maybe you have a CEO, then everybody in the role of their area of expertise, basically, to run the organization. Is that right? For the CIC?
Well, I mean, how you structure, they don't really specify how you structure it in terms of staff structure. I think it's just, you have to have a management committee. So remember, with the CIC, they're not called a board of trustees, they're just called a management committee, or you might call it a managing board or something. But most grant funders would say they needs to be a management committee, and it needs to be 3 unrelated people. But that's only if you're applying to grant funders. If you're not applying to grant funders, you've got more flexibility. But like I say, if you are applying to grant funders, that would normally be their requirement. Obviously, eligibility criteria varies between different grant funders, but in my experience, they would have that same standard kind of requirement: 3 unrelated people who are also directors of the company, who are also on the management committee.
Okay, so the directors of the management directors can also be the management committee. The same people can also be the management committee. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you apply to the grant funders, they'll say who is on your management committee or managing board, and that's where you'd have to decide, which 3 unrelated directors. I mean, that would be the norm, 3 unrelated directors. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I get it now. Okay. Now, must they be paid by salary, or they can be paid as self-employed when you're a CIC?
I mean, again, it depends where your money's coming from. I think I mean, when you say self-employed, this is where it gets a bit,
self-employed. That means you pay them and they can pay their own taxes and whatever, NI and not whatever.
So that's not the same as being a sole trader.
Yeah. Yeah, similar to being a sole trader. Yeah. Similar to being a sole trader, self-employed. Yeah. So registered.
Well, I think you've got to be careful there, because most grant funders will say they won't fund sole traders. So they're funding, it'd be a charity or a CIC.
Now I'm talking about your management directors. Yeah. How do you pay them? Must you pay them salary, whereby you're taking care of their employers' NI and take care of that, or you can pay them by self-employed route, where they do that themselves, pay the employment NI and employees NI themselves,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of that. I mean, normally when you apply to a grant funder, you have to put in, if you are applying for salary, you have to factor in pension costs, national insurance costs, and that'll be part of the overall sum of money you'll get from the grant funder.
Is that when it comes to CICs, you mean?
Well, it doesn't matter what your legal structure is. That's what, when you apply, so I'm saying, if you're applying to grant funders,
yeah,
you include a budget, which is a breakdown of how all the money will be spent.
Yeah.
And if you're, so that's, when the type of legal structure just basically means whether you're eligible to apply or not eligible to apply. It's the same. This is what I'm saying with the CIC. If you're a CIC and or a charity when you've got grant funding, how the money is spent is specified by the grant funder. So that's why you normally factor in, if you're applying to a grant funder for salary costs, you normally factor in those extra costs, like you said, the pension costs, the national insurance costs, and that's part of which the sum of money which goes to the charity or the CIC and is then paid. I think what you're talking about is almost like I mean, I would say you would have to speak to the grant funder, explain that to them, and I don't think they'd probably be too happy about it, to be honest. I mean, I think.
Okay, so what you're saying is the managing directors, they have to be employed by the CIC. That's what you're saying, isn't it? And so that you pay them salary. So
yeah, well, I mean,
cannot
that's
be
the point. That is what I'm trying to say. If you're applying to a grant funder, that's kind of the point, because the grant funder is giving that organization the money. It's not giving money to a sole trader. What
yeah,
you're
you
kind of
give it to
saying
a company, all right. But how do, obviously you're giving it to the company, all right, yeah. But how the company
what
pays?
you're talking about is almost like subcontracting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think
like that.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think grant funders will be particularly happy about that, because as far as they're concerned, they're giving it to a specific organization, and they want that specific organization to spend the money to deliver the services. I think when you get into subcontracting, I don't think, first of all, you'd have to specify that in the budget, and they probably wouldn't accept it. So, I mean, I think you'd have to speak to the individual grant funder, but I would imagine that's probably not something that they would be.
Let me put it another way. I'm talking about the employees, the managing directors charging for their services, their fees. Yeah. Can you pay them as self-employed like they do with contractors, like they do with they do on the construction side, you know, where they pay.
But this is what I'm saying about, it depends where the money is coming from. Say you're a CIC and you're trading, you're generating unrestricted income. You can do with this unrestricted income, you're free to do with that more or less as you wish. If it's restricted income through a grant funder, then it's very much dependent on what these agreements are with the grant funder. And the budget, you have a budget specified with the grant funder saying, this is the money, this is what we spent on.
Yeah. I mean, most grant funders that I've been dealing with are usually unrestricted funds. That's why I was speaking like that. Yeah. So okay, so you're talking about grants which are restricted.
I would say you need to speak to the grant funders specifically, because you can't really generalize across all grant funders. Say, well, all grant funders think this, all grant funders, you know, each grant funder has its own eligibility criteria, its own guidance, and its own, specific sort of conditions. So I think you'd need to speak to a specific grant funder and say, if you give us this money, and I think that, that'd be part of the budget application process. This is how we'll spend it, and you need to explain it. Some of the money will be spent on a consultant fee or whatever. You need to explain it in terms of your budget when you apply to the grant funder, and if they're happy with it, they're happy with it.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a question. It's not necessarily. When it comes to the legal structure, all the legal structure is basically saying is, this is our legal structure. Are we eligible to apply? It doesn't really give you the legal structures. Doesn't really give you specifics about how you should spend money or how you should structure your staff and stuff like that.
Okay, I get it. All right, that would be earlier. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions? Otherwise, thanks for your attending, and I'll send the I'll email you the slides afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I've put in a link in the chat. My name is Nyoka Lewis, and I'm with EHCVS. I support the Ealing Borough with funding and group development advice. If there's any support that you require, please email me. I've also put in a link for a survey to today's session. Request you to click that link. It'll just take a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thanks
very much.
And season's greetings to you all.
Thank you, and you.
Have a good holidays.